We went from a very rural country area. We moved to a place called Richmond Hill, north of Toronto, a suburb. The lifestyle was totally different. Fitting into the new school was really difficult, and it was just, okay, forget it kind of attitude.
Yeah. How old were you when you made that move to Richmond Hill?
12, 13.
All right. And I heard that, I guess you were around 15 or 16 when you dropped out of school.
Yes, 15. I was entered into what they call an early school leave program, which in Canada is a glorified way of saying dropped out of school, I'm sure.
So you started working at a bakery part-time?
At first, yes, I worked. No, it was a full-time job.
Full-time job?
Yes, sir. It was 11 at night till 6 in the morning.
Oh, okay. Sounds like hard work.
At the time, it was, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, at the time. I guess the choice was made for you to start over somewhere. Did you just, you knew about Daytona because you heard about it on the news, or circled it on a map, or?
I'm not even sure if starting over would be a good term. I think it was just pressure from everywhere, and not knowing how to deal with the pressure at the time was just get away for a little while.
What was the dynamic like at home? How was your relationship like with your parents and your brothers?
Is there such a thing as a minus scale in this question? There was no communication, none whatsoever. I would call it no relationship at all at that point.
Did they just kind of leave you with your own devices?
I think they just threw up their hands with frustration.
So I might be repeating myself, but I wrote down here, why Daytona Beach, and how did you make it all the way down there from where you were?
I'm going to say Daytona Beach, if you believe in coincidences, was a coincidence. It was not planned or anything of that sort. When we drove down, and on the way picked up a hitchhiker who was on their way to Daytona Beach, and that's where we went.
And you and who?
There was a man named Frank Neeson. He was from Richmond Hill, the same area where I was from, and he'd actually rented the car that we'd used to come down here.
Oh, okay. So you didn't steal a car to come down here?
It was rented with a credit card.
That you stole?
And the credit card was stolen.
From your mom?
Afterwards, I found out it was. It's crazy because, okay, I'm responsible, I was there, but the fact was that Frank got the credit card, and I just assumed he had it, and I didn't know that it came from my mom at the time.
Gotcha. Okay. Was Frank about your age?
No, Frank was he was like mid-late 20s.
All right, so you picked up a hitchhiker where?
Just south of Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Male or female?
Male.
Male. He was heading to Daytona.
He was on his way to Daytona.
And neither one of you had made up your mind on where you were going to
We
wind
were
up.
just coming to the beach. That's what our goal was. Daytona Beach sounded great.
Yeah. When you got to Daytona Beach, did you stick around with Frank, or did Frank go a separate way? Or
Frank and I stayed together for about 2 weeks. More and more, we would, I'll be honest, we were hustling, we were making money, however.
Yeah.
And he was just cutting for himself more and more and more and more, and it was like, okay, go. And that split our way. I actually seen him just before I got arrested, and he was living with a girl in Daytona Beach at that time. But we parted ways because of that.
Yeah. So how did you hook up with the family?
Okay. I had went from Daytona with another individual whom I met, Harold McLeod, and we had went around and about to Castleberry to Sarasota down to Arcadia, and I'm arriving back in Daytona by myself. There was a fight. It was a racial fight on Daytona Beach on the old off Atlantic Boulevard where the brick, what they called the wall, I don't even know if it's still there or not, but it was going on right there. And I drove up, and a couple of guys, man, you got to get us off the main, off beachside to mainland. All right, come on. And we were drinking and we were smoking pot, and that's where I met the family at.
So there was a razor fight, and there were a couple guys who got spooked by it?
A racial.
Oh, a racial.
Yes.
Well, that's more like it.
Yeah.
Because a razor fight sounds
unique.
It
was the mom, Carrie Parker, lived on Valencia Avenue off of Bellevue. And apparently when they were driving up, what's the name of that road? It's going towards the beach side. I want to say it was Bellevue Avenue.
Okay.
There's an ABC Liquor and a shopping mart right there. And apparently an argument took place and someone shot a gun and that all exploded into that right there. But that was before I even came along. I just found out that afterwards.
But a couple guys, I guess, flagged you down and said, we need to get off of here.
Yeah.
So you gave them a ride to the mainland. There was
Sure.
two other guys. And
No, the car was full. The car was full. It was Carrie Parker, Tim Hagan, Nugent, two other guys that were just there. A woman they called Georgia. It was just the car was full. There was like 7 or 8 of us in this car.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that was the family.
That was them. Yes.
Okay. All right. How long did you hang out with those guys?
Probably about 2 or 3 weeks. No, not even that long. I'm going to say about a week and a half, 2. This was, I do my timeline. This is how I do it. I turned 18 on May the 19th. I got back to Daytona just the week after that. So I would say about 2 weeks.
Okay. All right. I guess the victim in this case, his name was Jack Chaney.
Jack.
He had driven away from a golf course burglary that I guess everybody took part in, and everyone else had to walk home. So it seemed, based on what I read, that his name was Mud. I mean, everybody resented Chaney for what he did. And I guess there was some lingering resentment. Is that fair to say?
Okay, at that time, I would agree with you completely. I found out afterwards, while we were in the county, that there was far more to it than just that right there. At that time, I was under the impression we went to a golf course, we were going to break into a concession stand, steal some beers, some concession foods, get in the car and drive home. There was more to it than that. Apparently, it was something that Jack had set up, and there was supposed to be drugs involved. But I didn't find that out until I was in the county. And it might have been them talking too. I've thought about it. Maybe they were making it sound like that to make them sound bigger than they were. That's a possibility also. I'm not sure though.
Before I move on to, because how many people were in this family? How many co-defendants did you have?
Co-defendants did I have? There was Carrie Parker, James Nugent, George Hughes.
Okay, hold on. Let me write them all down. James Nugent. And the first one was Terry Parker, male.
Carrie Parker.
Oh, Carrie.
Female. They called her mom.
With a K?
C.
Oh. Okay, Carrie Parker, James Nugent.
George Hughes.
Georgia?
George.
George. Last name?
Hughes.
Hughes, okay.
John Cavallero. And Timothy Hagan.
Tim Hagan, okay. All right. And you. So that's
And me.
6 people total.
Yes, sir.
All right. And were there any other members of the family who didn't get caught up in all this? It was just basically the 6 of them?
No, constantly there was people that were coming and going. Some were just guys that didn't have somewhere to stay, and they ended up in Daytona Beach, and they were invited to come over. Some were guys that they knew in the past, girls also. It's just a constant influx. That was like the core, though.
Yeah, and back then, Daytona was a magnet for drifters.
And that's where most of them went and crashed and hung out and figured out what they were going to do, and then moved on from there.
Would it be fair to call you one of those drifters types?
I'm going to say it like this. I don't like it, but I think it's accurate.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Okay, so this is the part, Nigel. We're going to start.
I've been recording it.
Okay, all right. Tell me what happened on that day, and I know you don't know the specific date, but it was around early June of '86.
It was either a Thursday or a Friday
Okay.
of '86. We were talking about working or trying to find a job to go at the race because they had a race coming up. I want to say it was for the July 4th weekend. And apparently Kerry Parker had known someone or a group of someones that would allow us each to get a job out there. And apparently they do this every year, and there's a lot of money to be made out there just working. So we were all gearing up for that. We went and had like large amounts of beer, just all kinds, from another burglary of a concession stand, and we were just driving around drinking all over. Jack was getting really drunk, obviously drunk. He had drove up on to the curb. I'm trying to think, it was like a fast food restaurant off of Atlantic Avenue. And he drove up, and there was like a planter, and he'd gotten his bumper caught on the bricks of the planter. And I'm like, I'm not driving with this dude no more. I want out of this car. Mm-hmm. This dude look how he's acting. And then just from that point on, it was he, myself, and John Cavallero just arguing constantly, and it was just argue back and forth.
Who was arguing, you and John, and who else?
No, John and I were arguing with Jack. It was just, him and I were always just, man, drive, what are you doing?
And it was the three of you in that car?
Yes, sir.
What kind of car was it?
I want to say it was a Ford Thunderbird.
Was it Jack's?
It was Jack's.
And the car in front of you had everyone else?
It was a Cadillac Sedan DeVille. And I want to say it was a 1980 or a 1981. And that was George Hughes's car. And in it had everyone else, yes, sir.
And you wanted to be in that car?
I wanted to get away from Jack.
Because you were afraid that he was going to get killed maybe, or hurt, because of the way he was acting, or was he just being annoying? Just annoying. Him and I never got along. We were always cracking at one another. Today it was just, or on that day, it was just far more intense. Before I get to, I guess, the main part of that story, you kind of described yourself as this kind of young, naive person who felt like he was somebody because you were hanging out with older, tougher
mm-hmm.
guys and girls in
mm-hmm.
a couple cases. Explain to me what the attraction was being a part of that crowd.
Being somebody, being recognized as a tough guy, wanting to be a tough guy, not being a tough guy. Is that a good way of saying it? Wanting to fit in.
Okay, so what happened then? You guys were in a clearing somewhere near Ormond Beach, is that right?
Actually, we were looking for a place where we could park the cars and just go to drinking. We'd first went to, I want to say it was the Tomoka State Park. I'd never been there before. It was dark. Only reason I say I believe it was the state park is there were picnic tables in different little spots. And we'd actually stopped and we were sitting on the picnic tables drinking, and we seen lights coming in, and it was a police car. So we all got in the car, and there was a lane coming in and one going out. Now, I think it was Tomoka State Park. It may not have been, but it was something situated like that. We went out. I don't even know what the road was. We were heading north of Daytona, though. And we went out, and there was power lines, and Kerry Parker said, come over here. I know this spot, this area over here. And we pulled into a laneway, and Timothy Hagan and John Cavallero had gotten a tire iron and broke the lock on a chain that was holding a gate closed, and it was just a little laneway. And we went into the laneway, and what it was like a brake road underneath the big power lines. And we went out there, we parked. Well, let me back up again. Jack and I were arguing, and what I did was I went out and sat on the hood of his car, and I was livid because he was backing in. They were driving in, and he was backing in, and it just
And you were on the hood of the car, you were exposed. You
and
were
I'm
falling off.
getting just madder and madder because I'm feeling like he's trying to knock me off, or just why in the world would you back into this road? And I could never get an explanation of it. And we're yelling at one another. He's got the window down, and we pull up. And he backed up here where the Cadillac had came in, it drove in like this. So it's facing towards the road. And Jack had backed in and went like this. So his lights were shooting towards the car. And I'm livid, and I got up the hood of the car, and Jack's like, man, John Carroll, man, forget him, man. Let's beat him down. So Tim Hagan came out, and I went up to the car to get James Nugent. Because the fact is, James Nugent and I were closer in age. Him and I could relate to one another, and he's passed out in the back seat of the car, of the Cadillac. I opened the door, grabbed his leg, shook him, come on, man. And he wasn't responding at all. I shut the door. When I went back towards the front where Tim, John, and Jack were, Jack had said the words, they had a bank card, not a bank card, I apologize, a gas card that they used for filling up George Hughes' car. And Jack was asking Tim if he could use the gas car to fill up the tank of gas. And when I walked around there, he says, and maybe you can talk Russ into giving me a blowjob too, the faggot. And at that time, that was it. And I grabbed the gun and I hit him in the side of the head with the gun, and the gun went off. Well, Tim Hagan turned around and pushed me down on the ground because he said the bullet just about hit him. It went winging off.
When the bullet went off, how did you react? Stunned you, I bet.
I didn't, everything went slow motion. Everything was just moving really slow at that time. When I got up, because he'd pushed me down, when I stood up, Tim had leaned over him, and he said, Jack was on the ground, and he was kicking, like he was knocked out. And Tim leaned down, he checked his pulse. He said, he's just out cold. You just knocked him out real good. And John Cavallero says, kill him, and I can't move. And that's when John grabbed the gun from me, pushed me back. It looked like he kicked him, but maybe that's hindsight. It looked like he did, but his back was to me at that time. And he shot him. That was it. There was nothing else. That was all there was to it.
What happened then?
He took the gun, put it down my pants, the front of my pants, said, "That's how you do it. Now let's get out of here." So we went. He went to sit in the driver's seat and got the car stopped. So we're arguing. The Cadillac's pulling away. We're in the car. I told him to get out, let me drive. I started rocking it back and forth. We drove up out of there. When we got into Daytona Beach, I don't know where it was. I think it was like a hotel, but it was storied high. We'd shut the car off and park there, following Tim and them in the Cadillac. And all of us got in the Cadillac and left Jack's car right there. We'd roll down the windows and they wiped down the dashboard and all of that. There, I was in the back of the car arguing with Jimbo because, I don't know, somehow I felt like if he was there, that wouldn't have happened like that. I don't know why. I don't think it was rational, but I just felt like he'd kind of left me alone at that time.
So the body was left behind, right?
Yes, sir.
And the car was driven a ways, and then that was left behind.
Yes, sir.
And then everybody left.
Then everyone left.
Did you split away from the family after that?
I had gotten stabbed. I got cut. That was the next night. That's why I said it was either a Thursday or a Friday, because it was like the very next day or the day after I had gotten cut on the beach side, and I went to the hospital and was all sewed up.
Who cut you?
I don't even know. There was a fight that Timmy had got in, and one of the dudes ran towards me and cut me and took off running, and to this day I don't know who it was. But I want to say it was a Saturday. I had a 25 from another one of the guys from the family on me, and I got arrested for that right then.
You got arrested for what? I'm sorry?
It was a 25 automatic.
Okay.
And that's where I went to the juvenile. Actually, no, I didn't go to juvenile. I went to the county.
Went to county jail.
Yes.
You did wind up at juvenile hall at some point.
I was about to bond out for that, and they told me I couldn't bond out, that there was questions about my age. Actually, it was James Nugent who came. I had a $1,500 bond, and James Nugent came with $150 to bond me out, and they said, no. And that's when they came. They took me from there. Well, no, then they put me in the correctional facility. There's a desk, and you got the wings that goes off of it. There's like segregation cells, and I was in there, I don't know how long, maybe 3 or 4 days. And I went from there to the detention center.
And it was while you were at the detention center that you learned that people were looking at you for this murder.
Yes, sir. And that wasn't from officials. There was a girl named Kat. She was, if you look on the witness list for the murder charge, her name was Catherine, I can't remember what her last name is for nothing, but she was in the juvenile detention. She showed up and told me, hey, they're investigating that. And I'm like, huh? And that's when she started telling me that out on the street that they were looking at Carrie and them about that.
Okay.
Pause for a second there, just to stop this.
So you lawyered up.
Yes.
By the time all the charges were filed, I guess by the time the state attorney's office reviewed everything, you were the only one charged with murder.
I can't answer that. I was at Dozier School for Boys.
So you, pre-trial, they sent you to Dozier?
No, sir. For the carry, that's why I say there's a whole bunch more, because for the carry concealed firearm, they sent me to Dozier School under a BI special program.
All right. So you were charged with carrying a concealed weapon.
Yes, sir.
And you hadn't been convicted of that.
I was juvenile. You don't get convicted. They just found me to be a delinquent.
Okay. And then they sent you to Dozier.
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll get back to Dozier in a second.
Okay.
But when at one point, did you realize that you were getting pinned for this murder?
I was at Dozier. they had called me up to the main office from work, and there they had their entire staff set up. And they said, these are officers from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office to talk to you about Jack Channing. And I looked and I was like, excuse me? And they said it again, and I said, well, can I have a lawyer? And they said, do you want a lawyer present? I said, of course I want a lawyer present. And that was it. There was no conversation whatsoever from that point on.
I think this is what you discerned. I think this is what everyone else has discerned. That's usually doing the right thing, you know.
It was used against me.
Yeah. The others didn't lawyer up. They started talking, but they were probably telling half-truths or lies, maybe.
Well, I can explain that a little bit. We all went to D-Land, and at that time, the juveniles were completely isolated from the adults. So they went direct together. They went to the law library together. They interacted with one another going back and forth to court. I did not. So the initial stories, I don't even know if they're still available or not, but the original statements they all made indicated Jack is the trigger man. They said that I had fired a shot, but it was more of a hit, that Jack was the actual guy that killed him, and that Tim Hagen shot him afterwards. That was their original statements.
You mean, when you say Jack Cavallero?
Cavallero. I say Jack. I apologize. John Cavallero.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Jack was the victim. John
Yes,
was the
yes. But as the stories progressed, it went from Tim didn't have anything to do with it at all, from being Jack being the trigger man, then it became I became the trigger man, just through a progression of different stories.
I guess I'm probably asking you to speculate, and I don't know whether you want to do this, but you know, they were together a lot. They went to the law library a lot. They had their pretrial hearings together. Did they come up with this story?
It's not. I don't have to speculate. I know for sure that they did. The reason why is in the DeLand County Jail, in the law library, that's where you do your lawyer interviews also. So every time I had an interview with my lawyer, that's the room I went to. In the back wall, they had drawn an electric chair in the middle of the back wall, and it had all of their names out to the side with my name over top of the electric chair. And then you go in and you say, see on the table, John, look at book such and such. So I went up with my lawyer there and looked and showed book such and such. Go to this book. So we're going through. Here's what you got to say is this right here. And Carmen Corrente, who was my lawyer, witnessed all of that.
Okay, so you showed up in this room, which I guess was used by your fellow defendants, where they talked to their lawyers, and I guess they talked to police.
It was the law library. It was the DeLand County. The walls were the two left and right wall were bookshelves with different legal books.
And so you walked in there and literally taped to the wall.
No, drawn on the wall.
Drawn on the wall.
Actually drawn on the wall.
Like a mural.
Like a mural.
On the wall
is
was
an electric chair.
An electric chair with
Yes,
a little
sir.
Sparky on it.
Yes.
And your name was above it.
Yes, sir.
And you saw the names of your co-defendants.
To the left and to the right. Yes, sir.
Who drew all that stuff?
I believe there was a guy who's relevant to the story. We know him as Mark Mad Max. His name is Bastian Rashad.
Bastian Rashad?
Yes. Real weird spelling. Don't ask me how to spell it. If you go looking, if you want, I'd filed a 3850, and it's in there because I had a friend of mine go on the internet and search and find the spelling of his name.
But who's Rashad? Who was
he was a member of the family. He was in the county jail for a robbery. He was in the unit with James Nugent. He's the one that I had written a letter. I'd written a letter, man, I can't remember exactly what the letter had said, but I'd written a letter to him telling him to tell them dudes to just shut up for a little bit. Stop telling a different story every week. Why is everybody trying to be on the front page news? Why don't you just tell the truth and tell it the way it is if you're going to tell anything? I believe he's the one that wrote the letters, that one of them, because one of them is my letters. One of them is mine, but the other one is not. But those were, I believe he's the one, because he's an artist, he's a tattooist, and this thing in Daytona was the one that they used for signing off on credit cards and stuff.
So when you saw that drawing on the wall and these names, that must have been when you got your sense of doom that something was going to go bad
Yes.
for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You were asked to, or offered a plea.
They offered me 40 years.
Okay. And you think you would have gotten 40 years? So you're an 18-year-old kid at this point. 40 years seems like a very, very long time.
Then I couldn't grasp it. Then it was beyond my ability to even grasp.
And you also weren't going to serve 40 years for something you didn't think you did.
I wouldn't have copped out to it if I thought I could have done it in a couple of months. I didn't kill Jack.
Even if they had offered you probation or months in probation, you would have.
I don't think I would have, no, because I didn't kill Jack.
You're at this point kind of wayward, kind of a lost soul, but you still had a sense of integrity, personal honor, not to admit to something you did wrong for the sake of a lesser sentence. Can you explain that?
I'll try. At that time, it was really important for me to have that bravado image. It was really important for me at that time to be recognized as a stand-up dude. And believe it or not, I believe that it be just in my warped mind at the time, and this is hindsight. It's easy to see today what I didn't see then, but I think then it'd have probably been easier for me to face somebody shooting me than it would to be recognized as what I look at now and call it the kid back then was a piece of shit. And to be honest, if you were to call me that at that time, I'd believe I'd have been real dangerous to you, because that meant more to me than anything in the world to not be recognized as that. And the bottom line is Jack Chaney was even though him and I didn't get along, he was one of our group. He was one of our friends. What kind of shitbag would kill someone who's supposed to be their friend or in there with them? And it was just something that didn't fit in my head. Now, that doesn't justify or excuse me hitting him in the head with the gun, but I grew up with three brothers. We fought, hit each other with everything that you could imagine, but there was the point where, okay, we don't go past that point. Mm-hmm. And there's been many times where I've yelled at Jack, man, I'll kill you, and told other people, I'll kill that dude. But that wasn't a declaration that I was going to do that. That was, if my brothers could sit here and tell you how many times I said that to them or they're me, you would find it humorous, even though it's not a humorous situation. It's just, that's how it is.
And times have changed, but in 1986, for a young man like yourself who was trying to prove something, if someone called you a fag, that usually meant.
That's it. There's no rap beyond that right there. That's you correct, very correct.
Yeah. When did you realize you were so alone, that you were in on this? You had no allies, you had no friends, you had nothing on the outside to help you through it?
There were several instances, but the one that I'll never forget was I was in the holding cell. It was during trial, and I wanted to testify. And Carmen Correndi wasn't letting me testify. He told me that he didn't care. He wasn't going to get me on the stand, and I told him that I was going to get the judge. And he had actually brought my mom down to the holding cell, and it was, even my mom was with Carmen on pretty much, this, you're going to do it like this. And after they left, and I was sitting there and I'm saying, I can't even tell people my point of view. I can't even make a statement to defend myself. And
Your mother was encouraging you to follow your lawyer's advice
yes, sir.
and stay quiet,
Yep.
but you wanted to give your side of the story.
I figured if I was going to lose, at least I could let people know. At least I could, at least justify it myself, or at least finally have my day, because I never had my day. I never had anyone ever ask me what happened. I never had that.
This was while your trial was going on.
This is while the trial was going on. Yes, sir.
So by that time, you were already thinking, I could lose everything. I could lose my freedom. I could lose my life to this.
Yes.
A prison guard or a jail guard testified that you had admitted shooting and killing Jack. Did you?
No. No.
Why did this person testify to that?
The officer's name is William Snyder. And William Snyder and James Nugent were close friends. I found out afterwards that during my trial, Nugent was living, I want to say Hollywood, Florida, but it was somewhere way south out of Daytona Beach. And Nugent and his girlfriend actually came and stayed at William Snyder's house while my trial was going on.
How did you react during the closing statements? Correnti, for instance, apologized to jurors. I'm sorry I misled you. I said this person was going to be called to testify. That person didn't testify. So he apologized. I misled you. That's not something you tell a jury.
He did.
What did you think? I mean, you were pretty young and naive at this point, but it still must not have sounded right.
I knew then I was out of gas. I had no doubt in my mind at that time right there. My thoughts at that time, real talk, were whether I was going to spend life in prison or get the electric chair.
How do you think Carmen Correnti defended you?
In Florida, when someone makes a claim of ineffective assistance of counsel, they say that if my lawyer hadn't have done this, this would have happened, and it's possible I would have been found not guilty. Everybody I talk to, jailhouse lawyers, lawyers on the street, they agree with me. I got found guilty because of my lawyer. And I think you've read my transcripts, obviously. I'm sure you agree.
It sounds to me like you got charged with first-degree murder because of what the family did.
Yes.
And you believe that you got convicted because of what your lawyer did or failed to do.
Yes.
Did you know about the helicopter?
Okay, Johnny Bowie was in the county jail. So you know Johnny Bowie had a death sentence. Johnny Bowie was in the branch jail at this time. We were both in 3A. Johnny Bowie had been found guilty of first-degree murder probably a week earlier and was in the county with us, waiting whether he was going to get a life sentence or a death sentence. So him and I weren't in the big holding cell. We were in a hallway that had there was two little single-man cells here and two single-man cells here. I was in the back one on this side, he was on the back one at this side, and we would talk back together through the flat. And when the jury went to deliberate on my sentence, they took Johnny Bowie up in front of the same judge, Kim Hammond, and he got his death sentence. So Johnny came down, put him back in the cell. And the officers come and said, listen, we're not going to fly you out yet. We're ready to go. The helicopter's here, but we're waiting on him. And I looked, and they're like, yeah, we're waiting on you. The helicopter's on standby. So, yes, I knew the helicopter was there.
Explain your reaction then. Heart skip a beat?
No, because you couldn't have done anything to me at that time. I was numb. It was just, at that time, nothing, I was numb. You can't make numb more numb.
Judge Hammond. You felt like he rushed things in that trial?
Judge Hammond never asked me how I was doing. He never asked me what condition I was in. He never asked me if I understood what was going on. He never spoke to me at all except for the day that he imposed his sentence and asked me if I had something I wished to say.
Do you remember what you said?
I told my lawyer that I don't have nothing to say.
When your mother heard the word guilty, she went to pieces. Did you turn around and look at her and your
Yes.
father? What did you see and how were you feeling?
Let me go back a little bit. When they came and got me from the holding cell, they said the jury has a verdict. We came up the stairs and there's the hallway and then there's the courthouse, and my mother was outside the door. And I told her, do not come in the courtroom. And I told the jailer, do not let my mother in the courtroom. And he said, why? I said, because I just don't want her in the courtroom. Don't let her in the courtroom. Through the trial, she sat off to the side with my father and a pastor and his sister. When I went in and the jury, they asked me to rise, I looked and I seen my father, Pastor Chuck, and his sister behind me, and my mother wasn't there. So in my mind, okay, the jailer got her out in the hallway. And when he came out with the verdict and she screamed out, I was expecting the verdict. Like I said, at that time in my mind, I was waiting of whether I was going to get a death sentence or not. So I was totally numb at the time. The judge really went off later on at my sentencing because he didn't see me respond, I guess, the way that he wanted to. I guess he wanted me to break down and cry. The thing that he never knew is I was just all rashed up. I hadn't slept, and I was just such a wreck. I had rashes all over. And my mom knew that because they purposely, I told them they had to get a jacket that was bigger just because it was really bad. And that was just nerves. It was me just, emotional wreck. So when she did scream out, I really was mad, not at her. I was mad at the jailer because I never asked him for anything. I never asked him to do anything or anything. That's the only thing I asked him to do. That's the only request I had made through the whole thing. And it was like, you couldn't even do that? You couldn't even do something simple as that right there. And because I know my mom, I knew that was what. Actually, I expected it to be worse than that. But it was just, I told the jailer that. They knew that, and they never...
And she had to be let out of the courtroom while
I
she was
think
still
they had to help her carry her out. I think so.
When you say the jailer, this was obviously one of the bailiffs in the
Yes, sir.
courtroom? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about your life as a inmate at Dozier.
Wow, okay.
Were you beaten?
No, because first I was all sewed up. I had an arm brace and I was sewed up. I was a little bit older than I was. There wasn't very many guys my age there. They knew that I was involved because the family. So I was kind of like an enigma that didn't fit in. The staff parents couldn't understand how I went to a straight BI program with the carry concealed firearm. Why didn't I get probation, or why didn't I go to a foster home like the other kids? Why did they straight? So they were like, what's going on? And the other kids knew that, you know, I had gotten the shot because a BI program for what everyone believed was my first offense is unheard of. So they all were knowing, hey, who's he? What, you know? So no, I wasn't.
So you were more ostracized by the kids there, or not really ostracized?
No, not ostracized. You got to understand the mentality of the kids. I was like looked at with awe, and you know.
And what about the one-armed guard? And I mean, did anybody abuse you in any way, even verbally, over there?
Oh, I got. They allowed me to make a phone call, and I'll never forget this. I called my parents. I called my father's, and he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I'm allowed one phone call." And he says, "I don't want you to call this number again, because at this time we're on outs." He said, "I don't want you to call this number again." And I said something back, but I had ended up being you, and I hung up the phone, and the guard, they called them staff, but they're guards. Yeah. And he started screaming about, and I said, I apologize.
How could you do that to your own dad?
That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what the whole thing, and that was, you know, it was a verbal abuse.
And this was before you had even known that you were going to be charged with murder?
None of that was known at the time, no.
So your dad knew that you had run away and stolen your mom's credit card?
Yes, yes.
Was that the first time you had talked to him since you left?
First time, yes. Him?
Yeah.
I talked to my mother several times before that, but him, no, that was the first time I spoke to him.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about your options, your transfer pursuit, what the parole situation is. But I wanted to talk a couple more times, just a couple more questions about the trial. And we only have about 40, how much time? Yeah, 10 minutes left.
Okay.
You already talked about Hammond. I mean, he died last year. He's had a courthouse named after him. He was eulogized by our U.S. Senator, Bill Nelson, praised him for his goodness and his integrity. But you must have some resentment for him.
I wrote him a letter. I'm going to say it was in the late 90s. Because it's going to sound crazy. But I try to see the whole thing from his eyes. And I actually thanked him. I actually thanked him because take the situation and put it aside. I mean, the death of Jack, that's not what I'm including in this, but just I couldn't be who I am today without all of that. I don't know if he meant it that way or not, but there's one thing that I remember he said when he sentenced me, and he said that he believes that somewhere inside of me is some good. And he hoped that I found that good. And I'd written him a letter and thanked him. Because at that time, I really believed that I'd found that good.
So let's talk about your options.
Okay.
Let's talk about what you're trying to do to transfer back to Canada and why. What's your motivation for that?
I don't expect my mom to live the year. She's that bad off. Every time I talk to her, it's worse. I don't know if that is what we're going to call psychosomatic symptoms or not. I'm going to say in the last 5, maybe 6 years, I think the person who suffered the most, paid the most, other than Jack and probably his mother, was mine. I never used to look at it like that, but now I see that. I've said it before, if they welded me in a box and sent me to Canada and told me I couldn't leave the box for the rest of my life, I'd still want to go to Canada because of the fact that me being here is killing the people out there that never did anything wrong. I have been to the worst prisons that the state of Florida has to offer. Everywhere I go to, I have worked. And I mean, not because I had to, because if you know it or not, the hard jobs are optional. And I pretty much volunteered for them. I like to work, but also because I don't want, Florida, I came to Florida as a guest. I mean, how horrible and shameful is that? I don't want anyone to ever say I didn't pay my debt. I don't think you can ever pay the debt that comes with the loss of a life. However, with all respect to Jack Chaney's mother, I hate the fact that the state of Florida knew who killed her son and let him go. And I didn't. And if 32 years in the state of Florida hasn't made it right yet, it isn't never going to be right. So I would ask the state of Florida either let me go back and try to make my family's life a little less miserable, or just kill me and take me out of everybody's misery, because it's at that point now.
Small victory, maybe the only one during your post-conviction life. In 2019, you will have a parole hearing scheduled. God only knows when it will be scheduled. Is there still, do you still cling to the hope if a transfer doesn't happen, you can still be paroled, or you still have some time left?
I'm at Hardee because the parole board sent me to the Life Path Group Project. Since I've been at Hardee, I have 100% poured myself in to the Life Path Group Project. In fact, that sergeant right there will tell you how much I've put into it, because I've not only been a part of it, I've taken a leadership role and have tried really hard to drive it to something really positive. I'm not doing that for parole, and the only reason I say that is because in the dormitory there's a man I know that has 42 calendar years done, and the parole board keeps telling him, well, give us a few more years. I have zero confidence in the Florida Parole Board.
And you were denied parole the last time you were up, and that wasn't long ago, was it?
That was 15.
2015?
Yes, sir.
Did they give you any reason why they didn't grant you parole?
Same reason they give everyone else. You're not ready.
You haven't had a litany of disciplinary problems or anything like that?
I have, yes.
Okay.
I have, yes.
You've had disciplinary problems?
My answer to them is, and it's the same answer, and in my benefit, is this. They sent me to Union Correctional Institution as a kid. What did you expect? You sent me to Baker Correctional Institution because you shut Union Correctional Institution down. What did you expect? You sent me from Baker to Franklin, which is another one. What did you expect?
Rough places then.
I went to ACI. What did you expect? All you got to do is look at where they're at. But when they did give me a break and sent me to Wakulla Annex, which is a faith base, and then they sent me here, I almost have 5 years DR free. I think actions speak louder than words. All you got to do is look at the paperwork.
How have you changed that kid with a chip on his shoulder?
Is this a joke?
Just want you to riff away on this question.
I'm going to say it like this. That kid is dead and gone and been dead and gone. In fact, sometimes when I look back, I can't even grasp who and what that kid was. I think the only answer I can give is what hasn't changed, and I can't think of anything that hasn't.
What's your relationship like now with your father?
Great. It's my friend.
brothers?
My oldest brother, my idol. My other brothers, they got broke. Me coming here hurt them, smashed them. I got to get there before we can work on that.
And how do you feel about those helping you? Likes of Ellen and Mary Beth.
I'm going to say it like this. In Psalms, King David has a prayer and he says, "Oh God, what is the likes of me that I would gain your attention?" And that's kind of like my view of him. It's just like, wow. Don't deserve it, have no clue why. Humbled by it, blown away by it. Those are two awesome people. Well, not just them, because there's more now, but them people blow me away. You blow me away. For real. Just the fact that you would take your time to come here blows me away.
So, how do you picture this ending? And how have you sustained hope through all of this?
How do I predict this ending? I predict that today I'm going to affect a life. Tomorrow I'm going to affect a life. And hopefully it just continues like that. Whether it's in here or out there, I'm just going to spend each day, hopefully, affecting a life. And whether I'm there or here, I can only affect or have an effect on affecting a life. The rest of that's too big for me to deal with.